That night he could not sleep. The intoxicating power of zombie takeout made it clear to him why he had clung to his own life so tenaciously. Hello and welcome to Zombie Takeout, the B-movie and cult movie show. I'm John. Scotto's off this week, and joining me is Appoline Romanens. Hello.
Hi, John. Good evening.
And this week's movie actually is your suggestion, which is why you're here, of course. And it's your favorite movie based on your favorite book.
Because it's a novel and it's a book, and it's also a movie that I love. So I love both materials, actually. Yeah.
And of course, that brings us to this week's movie, which is from 2006, Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, and of course, the impromptu plot summary, sponsored by Ode to Humanity by Grenouille. It really brings things to a climax.
Sponsored by Amor and Psyche by Pellicier. Is it cinnamon or clove? Or maybe patchouli?
And you're going to take a shot at the plot summary in Scotto's absence.
Okay. So it is the story of Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, born with an extraordinary sense of smell, who set out on a mission to preserve smells at all costs, even if he goes on a killing spree for it. The story mostly takes place in Paris and Grasse in Italy. It's a dark fantasy movie that will leave you wondering why you find Ben Whishaw so sympathetic.
All right. And the movie begins with this great flash forward kind of tease where we see Grenouille arrested and being taken out to effectively be executed. And it just kind of sets up this expectation that ultimately the movie completely subverts.
You see this scene, and then the film goes on explaining why we've come to that point. So then you have to remember why this initial scene began, and then it tells you why. So I thought that you, as the viewer, you were forced to remember all of the events, which were quite a lot, actually, and then go back to that initial scene and connect it to the end, which we will not reveal in order to...
The exact ending we won't, yeah. Because there's a twist at the ending, and it's not like a Shyamalan twist. It's this event that you would never see coming, given what he had done up to that point.
I mean, unless you've read the book, you know what to expect as you watch the movie. But if you didn't, there's nothing that can tell you what's going to happen.
No. And in that scene where he's about to be executed, there's this great push in on his nose that leads to the title card. And it really kind of sets up the movie really nicely.
It is really well done, because you only see a little bit of lightning on his nose, and then he breathes in the air, and then you wonder, why do we have a focus on that sort of body part, which is not really normal? Right. And he tells you something, and you say, oh, I'm going to watch something that's really uncanny. That's not really normal. You're in for something different.
And then it cuts back to his birth in Paris, and this is set in the 1800s?
18th century, yeah.
Yes, 18th century. So it's Paris in the 18th century, and Tom Tykwer, the director, really went all out on the dirt.
Because the point is to show that the newborn baby can sense every smell. Whatever the smell is, whether it is guts or just fish flown off, or something very dirty, very stinky odors, you can smell everything. But as the viewer, what I really love about this movie is that the sense of the seeing is possible through the movie, because you can't really smell, because in the book you can smell, you can read as you smell, but in the film you're supposed to smell as you see. And this comparison, this balance is really well done, which is why this is such a great movie.
There's a shot where he's taken to an orphanage because his mother is executed. And these kids are kind of, they're planning to kill him, actually, because they set up that he's different in some way. They don't really reveal till halfway through the movie. But one of them is kind of poking at him, and he grabs the much larger kid as an infant. He grabs the finger and sniffs it, which is a great shot. And the baby, Grenouille, I couldn't tell if it was animatronic or CG. If it was CG, it looks amazing. It really looks kind of animatronic. Actually, it looks like a real kid, but an actual kid couldn't do these things.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought of that. It's probably CGI then.
probably CG, but it just looks surprisingly good. And there are a lot of great close-up shots in the movie. The grabbing the finger. There's another shot of dirt and maggots, and I'm just really glad I wasn't eating anything that kind of looked like that while watching the movie, because the Paris stuff is really kind of disgusting.
It is. It was supposed to be one of the dirtiest places in the world. Actually, in Europe, it was. A marketplace where Grenouille is born. It just smells horrible, which is also why his life was saved. So in a way, his environment, as dirty as it is, saved him. So, and also you mentioned his mom, and as I was watching this movie for like maybe the fifth time or something, I noticed that as his mom is sent to the gallows, he's alive because she's dead. And when the lady in charge of the orphanage sells off Grenouille to a tannery or something, she's killed as well. She's killed off just as well.
Everybody he leaves gets killed throughout the movie.
So that foreshadows that whoever gets in contact with him or gets close to him will meet, a terrible end. And you can tell, but if you don't know what the movie is about or what will unfold right till the end, you don't notice this. And this movie is made, I think, to be watched again, to connect the shots together, to see that this position, for instance, when he's in this garden in the orphanage, he opens the doors in a kind of glorious manner, and that reminded me of the way he just extends his arms when he's about to be sent to death, whatever, and he's just as glorious. And I wonder, did that kid had all of that sort of presence when he was alive? It's just, and if you've not seen that the final shots, you cannot connect it to that one.
Yeah, this is my second time seeing it, and there are definitely things that I noticed this time that I didn't catch the first time. And there's some great lines, and I'm sure they're straight from the book. In Paris, he gets a job with this perfumer played by Dustin Hoffman, who was a big surprise in the movie. And they're talking about this place called Grasse, this city of Grasse, where you really go to learn your craft as a perfumer. And it was described as a utopia of unexplored smells.
Yep.
I loved that line. And the line about how he's not picky about smells, good or he doesn't distinguish between good or bad as long as they're new.
Yep.
And I got to give credit to Ben Whishaw, the lead actor, played Grenouille. He doesn't say a word for the first maybe good 10 minutes of the movie.
Because in the book, and it is explained in the movie, he didn't speak till the age of 5. And if you consider the impact of language on him, you notice that he learns to pronounce words as soon as he can smell them. He repeats the name of something. Like one is at night in Baldini's laboratory. Baldini gives him the names of the flasks that he's taking out and testing. And then Baldini looks at the label and says, "Oh, this is patchouli, this is cinnamon, this is whatever," and then he repeats them because he doesn't know the name of the thing. So he's naming the things through the way he smells them.
Right.
That a kid learning to speak, learning words would learn it through sounds, and he's learning it through the way he smells it. And when he knows how to smell them, he knows how to pronounce them because someone pronounces them for him.
And I should mention, this is based on a 1985 novel called Perfume by Patrick Susskind. And we have kind of an odd connection through this movie. It's the movie adaptation of your favorite book, and it was directed by Tom Tykwer, who co-directed Cloud Atlas, the movie adaptation of my favorite book. And this stars Ben Whishaw, who was also in Cloud Atlas. Now, you mentioned he's kind of like a child. And this actually leads nicely to the surprising main story of the book, or this movie, I should say, his killing spree.
Yeah. There is a notion of innocence the first time he does it, because
it's accidental.
Yeah, he notices this girl with the plum who has an injection on him, and then he follows her, and then he wants to get as close as possible to her, but as soon as she notices him, she gets scared because someone she doesn't know.
Silent guy following her, and she stops. She asks him if he'd like to buy some, and those are plums. Okay, I've never seen yellow plums before. And she asks him if he'd like to buy some, and he can't talk. So she gets creeped out and runs off. And he chases her down.
She sees no reaction from him, so she goes on with that mode of, okay, I'm selling whatever I have. So then she says, would you like to buy some? And then she extends her hands, and that's when he grabs it, and he smells it like this, but she's afraid because he's like,
oh, I forgot about the hand grabbing.
And then she's like, what is he doing? And that's what it did to people. From now, he only smelled them. And whenever he did that, you mentioned the when he was a baby, someone poking a finger at him, and he was grabbing it and smelling it. Everything that he does from now around people is just smelling them. And this is weird. Would you imagine meeting someone that you don't know, you've never heard of, and then just the person would just smell you, you know?
And she runs off, and he actually tracks her down on scent alone. He doesn't see where she runs.
He smells, it's as if he had a sort of GPS running with the smell of the people that he wants to track. Because when she's running off, there are some fireworks going on. It's a big celebration, whatever. Everyone is dancing. So the smell of powder conceals the real smell he wants to track and he wants to follow. And despite that, it still manages to find her, to track her as it is. Yeah. And then so then he smells her, he's enthralled with her smell, and what happens is that she sees him, she screams because she's afraid. And there are two lovers kissing each other. And while the kiss lasts, he follows her, so then she cannot breathe. And that's if the kiss has lasted a little less, she would have still been alive, you know. That's because of the love of two other people.
Yeah. No, didn't realize that.
She died. Yeah, because he's just holding her like this and just shushing her screams, but he doesn't realize his strength or whatever. He just wants to shush her because he doesn't want anyone to notice.
And that was what I was getting to. Is basically a child. He's never been socialized because he was raised in this orphanage, and he's an outcast for a reason we don't quite know yet. And so he's basically just pure id at that point. It's just all about what he wants.
Yep.
And after he kills her, he strips her and begins sniffing her.
Yep.
And there's this great moment just before he does where he's looking at the corpse and he just shakes his head. Like he knows what he's about to do and he doesn't want to do it, but he can't resist.
I guess it's not quite that, if you allow me. I think he realizes that she's dead and that he didn't want that to happen.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
He realizes that as she's dead, the smell is fading. And he didn't want to kill her. He just wanted to preserve the smell.
Right.
You see?
Okay.
So he's like, but what's going on? She was just there. And then it just evaporates. It just fades away. What's going on? What have I done? And effectively, he realizes that she's dead. So it's probably the first time where he sees death in a human being. And he's ashamed of himself. And although he kills many women as the movie unfolds, he has this persistence, this sort of love that continues for her. He dreams of her. He thinks there are many scenes where they are sort of reunited. He's obsessed with her. But he could have been obsessed with Laura, who was just as beautiful as she was.
And he has a flashback to her right before the ending, the part we're not going to spoil. Which kind of I took as kind of the reason for his decision to do what he did.
Yeah, I think he realizes that he cannot be loved despite all the artifacts that he may pull or whatever smell he can lather himself with. And then no purpose in his life, then he's like, I should just give up. What am I supposed to do? But I think that's where the movie falls short of being a great movie. Because that's what Susskind wrote, so you know the director has
it's more of a criticism of the book,
But I've seen movies where the director just decided to take another step, to take another path and do something different. And I think that if Teichner had done that, that would have been great, because it would have been his interpretation of the book. Because you cannot really not be unmoved by this book. This is you have to take something personal from it. You have your own opinion on it. So I would imagine if you were to direct this movie, you would have put something of you into it. You know?
Right. And then he meets with what was the name again? Hoffman's character.
Yeah. I'm bad.
The
That's
Italian.
that's no. That's Baldini.
Baldini. I couldn't remember his name. He meets with Baldini and he says, "You have to teach me to make perfume, to collect smells." He actually says, "I have to learn how to keep smell,"
Preserve.
which
Preserve smell is the actual term.
in the book, maybe in the book, I have it
In the
down. He
film
says,
as well.
"Keep."
In the film as well.
Oh, he says preserve. I have.
Preserve. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have his keep. Same,
It's
essentially
okay.
the same thing. And it really kind of tips what his issue, what his problem is. And I'll just get into that now. He doesn't have a smell of his own,
That's it.
so
That's why he was an outcast, as you mentioned. He
um,
he was unloved from the beginning because he cannot.
mhm.
People recognize you with your identity is part of what you smell. If you don't smell like anything, you have no identity. And I would go as far as saying that in this movie, your smell, your odor is your soul.
Interesting. Now I have to nitpick that scene a little bit. He's explaining how perfumes are composed, and he says perfume, like music, has four chords. I'm sorry, four notes in a chord.
Yep.
Three chords in a scent. Chords have three notes, not four. I mean, extended chords have four, but a standard chord has three. Nitpicking.
I'll have to check on that, but I think
I know he said
three notes. No, three chords or three notes.
There are three notes. There are three chords, but he said each chord, and I'm sure maybe this is true in perfume, but he said each chord, like in music, has four notes. And then some extended chords have four notes, but standard chords have three notes. I'm again nitpicking. The scenes between those two are the only time in my life I've ever had an interest in learning to make perfume, because they just make it sound so interesting.
It is true, but I think it's a very complicated craft.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know I shouldn't have found it funny, but I did laugh when Baldini pulled the cat out of the still.
Oh, I died.
Probably because of how it was posed. It just, I don't know, it amused me.
But even when he tries to distill, iron, and he's like, "You lied to me. Glass. I cannot preserve the smell of glass." And then Baldini is like, "But the glass is effectively no smell." And then Grenouille is like, "But yes, it does." There's a conflict between the way the perfumer, the original, renowned perfumer in Paris smells things, and this guy, unknown to everyone, who says glass is the smell.
Well, without the murder, it's basically just the prodigy story.
Coming of age as well. Yeah.
And this prodigy with this immense amount of natural talent learning to hone his craft. But then in this case you throw in all the murder.
And also this notion of Grenouille challenging the aristocracy. He's just a nobody. He's just, he has no family, no name, isn't known. And then he goes with Baldini pretending to behave like a sir, like someone who's well educated, although he knows next to nothing, just his craft. And I think this conflict between the aristocracy and the people, is interesting as well to take into account.
And I love the irony of someone with no natural scent of his own having super smell. Being so attuned to scent, even though he has none of his own.
Yeah.
And then he's on his way to Grasse, where Baldini sends him to hone his craft. He finds his way up this mountain because that's where his nose leads him. And I just love the idea of this cave being the only place he's ever found with no scent. It's basically like the only silent place he could find for someone, with sensitive hearing like myself. I just really related to that, in that sense. It's like the smell of I think they said dead stone.
They said dead stone, that's
would
right.
be analogous to like white noise of like a stream outside.
Interesting. Because he stays in this cave. In the book, it is mentioned that he still thinks of that, girl with the plums, but it's not mentioned in the movie, which is a shame, I think. But it's okay. But he's like, it's come to a point in his life where he's practically done what he wanted to do. I mean, coming up to Grace, and then he takes off the smell of the dead stones to think that after a month or two there might be some smell. I mean, his body should smell horrible, and it doesn't. He washes off whatever smell he smells, and then there's nothing. And this is where the movie verges on the fantasy, realm, because it could be possible that you could have, this wonderful gift from birth, wherever it is, writing, calculating, smelling, compute. He's an artist in a sense, So being very good at what you do, although you've never had any instruction, is something that we see.
Yeah.
But the idea that he has no smell, as you point out, is interesting, because that's when the viewer, the reader, starts to think, okay, is this real or is it not? Just, and this balance is very interesting.
Right. And this leads us to, when he gets to grass, my only real criticism, and again, this is probably a criticism of the book, like yours was. His first kill is this woman in a barn at this perfumery he begins working at, and there's no rhyme or reason for it. She's just alone in the barn, and he preys on her. And next, he kills a prostitute who had sort of humiliated him. I feel like it would have made more sense if those two were flipped. If his first kill was a little more motivated, and then he gets the taste for it, and then he kills the girl in the barn for no apparent reason other than her smell.
I think there might be an explanation to this, is he is so captivated by the smells he can catch in grass that to him it makes sense to catch a girl from grass and kill her. Like,
okay,
maybe she carries this legendary, this legendary place for perfumers, and he wants to take that away with her. Just, but I don't know. But it's true. Because sometimes in the way he picks women, you're like, maybe he could have picked someone else, or someone different. Or maybe the movie could have spent a little more time on describing why she was choosing this one, because at some point it just grabs a woman in an alley and it just kills her.
Right.
And I felt like each of his kills were motivated by something. And when the director just decides to pass a few ones, just to say, he kills.
Well, he goes up on this huge killing spree, and you just see these bodies of nude women with shaved heads in grass.
This is a bit shocking in a way.
Yeah.
Because if he was an artist, if you were to make a painting, if you were to pick colors, you would choose each color very, very carefully.
Right. And at one point, when you see the plum vendor, and then Laura, who he kind of builds up to, they're both redheads. So he kind of get the impression that, if for a guy who is operating on scent alone, he seems to have a taste for redheads. But then there's all these killings in the middle, and when they're all strewn throughout the city, it's really obvious that they're all models because they're all built the same. It just happened to strike me that it's clear that they all have the model build, because that's they're extras basically.
This is one of the critiques I have of this movie. We know that why does Grenouille pick this girl or this woman is because she's beautiful. And beauty can be ugly. I'm a big fan of Charles Baudelaire. This is no secret. But to me, the movie would have made more sense, and it's not really depicted in the book, that the person he kills, he's killed because she's stunningly beautiful. So yeah, they're all they're all pretty nicely built and stuff. And I think it would have been more interesting to show a girl not for her beauty but for her smell. Not solely based on appearances, but also the power that she has inside. No.
And he also killed this set of twins before he got to Laura, even though he had an opportunity. It was like he was kind of building up to her.
Maybe he was just scaring her, or he meant to kill her, but he couldn't, because she's in the maze, and she's running off because she's afraid, and then she's caught by the person who wants to love her, but she doesn't have any feelings for him, and then she's caught off guard, and she says to the guy, "Put me down," but if he hadn't been there, I think she would have.
Grenouille basically saved her at that point, because he threw a stone at a lamp and caused enough of a distraction for her to run away. And if you were going to go after her, if he was aiming for her at that point, I think he would have had a chance to follow her at that point, there. But she gets away, and he lets her get away and kills his set of twins, kind of as if he's building up to her. And there's this great shot a little later, after this series of murders, I should say. Her father, played by the late great Alan Rickman, has her sent away so she's safe. And there's this great shot where he's tracking her down by scent, and there's what I call the nose cam, He sniffs the air, and the camera just follows the scent straight to her on horseback.
Yeah, that's a nice name that you got there. Yeah, and then as the camera follows the two riders, you realize that one of the because Alan Rickman is traveling with someone that you don't know, and then as Grenouille follows the two riders, one of the riders has a hat, and this hat falls off, and then the fiery, and you realize that it's her, you know.
And it's a great shot, except right after that, and this seems odd, she looks back at the camera.
Which is weird. Why would she do that? It felt as though they were connected. I mean, it's sort of soul connecting level, you know. And this is weird because she had no way of knowing.
She looked straight back at basically Grenouille's sense of smell. I think it was just making absolutely sure that we knew that was her. It was almost like there's a shot earlier when after he kills the twins and he's distilling their scent. A bit of it spills on his hand when his boss effectively walks in to yell at him. And as soon as he smells it, he calms down and he's very nice to him.
Yep.
And they show the drop on his hand twice. Like just to hammer it home. Which seemed unnecessary. Just showing it once would have been enough to get the point. But that was kind of like Laura looking back at the camera, you know, just so we know that's her.
That's a detail I didn't see, and I mentioned that I've seen the movie like 7 times or something. So, okay.
But before that, there's this great head fake where he breaks into her bedroom, and he's standing over her bed, and she looks up and sees him, and then they cut to her father waking up and shouting.
Wait, there's something else. There's something else before that because I paid attention to this because that's in because the first time I watched it, I was probably 10 or something, and I always wondered why, when she looked back at him, she was not afraid, and there was no hint of any fear in her eyes.
Yes.
Then you hear the sea falling because you know the scene is set near the I think it's in France somewhere, but it's next to the Mediterranean Sea, and you see the blue eyes of Laura. You leave that blue, and you see the ocean, and then there's just a wave coming crashing down, and you can hear this crashing. And I thought, would that mimic the killing actually when you know he blows you know just kills her that way? I wondered.
And then we see her father waking up and we assume that he'd killed her. She's alive.
Yeah.
And it almost sets up a bit of a false expectation at that point. Because I kind of got the impression, you know, the first time I saw it, because obviously I knew the second time, that she was going to be the one to save him. You know, she was going to be the exception. It almost set up, but of course she isn't.
No, she isn't. If it had been the case, I think the viewer would have been a bit disappointed because you know the super awesome, beautiful lady saving, you know, taking off the whatever evil there is in man. This is a very boring topic. Very, you know. So there's no exception. You know, he needs her. And that's what what's his name again? Laura's father tells her. He says, I feel like whatever he needs to do with these women, whatever he creates will not be a masterpiece unless you're part of it.
Right.
Which is beautiful because he says, I'm your dad, and I think that you're one of the most beautiful women out there. So why would you not be in his project? So that's a declaration of love from Laura's father to her, because every father would say to whatever their daughters or sons that they're beautiful, they're nice, So you think, okay, he's just saying that to her because he loves her, and actually he's right. He's felt something, you know. Father intuition versus the killing, murder, you know, interesting.
And I also noticed that Laura was the only victim we didn't see nude. When we find her on the bed, you know, shaved. There's a sheet over her rear end. The only victim in the movie we don't see nude. I'm sure it's more of her contract than anything to do with the movie, the story. But
probably.
And then he gets arrested, and we get to that beginning scene. Except there's a twist. He has a vial of his perfume. And was it just Laura, or do you think that was the entirety of all of the scents he had collected up to that point?
At that point, the perfume is complete, I believe.
It's all of the scents he collected.
Yep.
And somehow he smuggled it in when he was being executed. I would think they would have searched him. You know.
I wondered how he got that vial into his cell without,
Mm-hmm.
being noticed. Because when he's arrested, he's on a hill. He gathered all of his materials and the perfume, which is complete. And then maybe he did something so that he could, slip off that perfume and keep it with him. But we didn't see that. I think he tricked the crowd arresting him so that he could do that. Unless there's no way he could have kept that.
And so he's taken to the execution, and he rather dramatically puts a bit on a handkerchief and just waves it around to the crowd.
But the performance of Benoit Shaw is very interesting in this because we really see that as he does that, as he decides to pull out this handkerchief and spread a dab of the perfume onto it, he really pays attention to the reaction because he doesn't know what's going to happen. And after all, he's playing with his life. He decided to act proudly and mighty, and he knows what he's doing, but effectively he does not. He doesn't know how people will react to that. So you see his eyes darting, looking at effectively everyone in the room, wondering if it's working. And it is. Effectively, it is. So.
Well, because as he waves it, everybody comes to their knees and becomes enthralled with him.
Yep.
And then it turns into a huge orgy. And I mean a stadium full of orgy. Because Tom Tykwer considered the orgy scene to be a dance, which needed choreographing, he turned to a dance troupe called La Fora del Baus to help him put the scene together. That was actually choreographed by a dance troupe.
That's a really interesting information that I didn't come across, and I'm really glad that you did.
Although I did notice that there were no men with men in the orgy. It was men with women or women with women.
At some point, we see two men standing up after when everyone wakes up and realizes what happened.
Mm-hmm.
They connect. They're connected, but it's
okay. There's a brief moment. Okay,
it's not obvious.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Interesting.
And I didn't catch the memory of the plum vendor before Grenouille's ending until this time.
And there's something I want to mention about this, and we may need to look back into it. But as the crowd gathers in that before the scaffold, there's a woman you only see the back of that woman, and she's dressed just as this girl with the plum, and she carries a basket of plums.
Yes, there's one that kind of rolls down. If you see the plums spill out, and one kind of rolls down toward him.
She walks in order to find a good spot. And the camera follows her, and I thought, would that be the girl with the plums? Would it be a ghostly appearance or something?
A ghost could be just another plum seller.
Yeah, or just another thing. But it reminds you of that woman, and she's very present in the film. She's always there, and it's in a sense a sort of intoxicating presence. He always thinks of her, and I think she's there to remind us of that. That he's done that for her. Or because of her, but effectively, she's there. I also want to mention that this scene with the orgy that you mentioned, it is very important to remember that at that time, movies were not around. There was no zombie checkout episode at all. So an execution was
entertainment.
It was entertainment. So when the crowd is super excited to see him, when at the beginning they say, we cannot hold them any longer, that's because the crowd wants to feast on him. And maybe we don't want to reveal the ending, but if you think about this, in the attitude of the crowd, when you see them trying to grab this handkerchief or trying to see the murderer, remember that, and maybe you can connect the end to that, and it could be easier for you to figure it out why it happened that way.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the handkerchief would be kind of like when a guitar player throws his pick into the audience at a crowd, or something of that nature. A celebrity throwing something into a crowd. I never thought about that. I am curious how many innocent men were tortured into taking the fall for him, though.
I
think they established 2 or 3, but it's
the boss admitted to have committed these crimes after, I think, 14 hours of torture.
And there was at least 1 or 2 other cases. In Grasse, there was a man who was tortured into admitting it as well.
Yep. shows that the system at that time was definitely not flawless, because people start to think that the clergy has to say something, to have a say on it, and then the only solution they find is to excommunicate him, which has no effect on him because he just doesn't care. And then people, are arrested and they claim to have committed the murders, but they didn't. So there's a criticism of the society at that time that's thrown into the movie, which is also interesting to take into account.
It's kind of like when Laura's father is talking to him as he's about to be executed, and he says, I'll be there watching, and I'll climb up and look at you with disgust as they're about to kill you. It's kind of a pale threat compared to the threat of execution.
But I noticed that. So what's his name? The name of the actor who plays Laura's father.
Alan Rickman.
Oh yeah, Alan Rickman. He says he's threatening him, and then instead of being put back into the water again so that the torture may continue, I thought it was great that he was just left hanging there thinking of those words. If he had been plunged back into the water, that would have been less effective, because you're there with him and you're waiting to see what's going to happen. But then this has meaning, and that's probably when he realizes that he killed women that were loved. He knows at that point. You can't say that he's done that out of innocence. That's what we said for the first killing, but he knows that they're loved.
And I kind of wish the narrator hadn't spelled out why Grenouille does what he does at the end. That he realizes he'd never been loved. Because it could be seen in a couple of different ways if you didn't have that direct spelling it out.
Since it's based out of the movie, I think Teichner wanted to pay a sort of tribute to the movie, to the book, so that he included sentences, sentences into the movie, told by the narrator.
Yeah. I kind of got the impression that the narrator was Susskind's kind of stand-in. His effect, kind of, he was there in Susskind's place to just spell out stuff that couldn't be shown.
But again, it's a critic I have. Maybe it would have been better if the narrator hadn't sort of dubbed what was going to happen, what was happening, because we figured it out through the images, through the very beautiful scenery. We probably don't need an explanation. But again, if you hadn't read the book, you wouldn't know. So it's there for those who are unfamiliar with the story.
I liked it being a little, and I generally like things that are a little ambiguous. Does he do it? And I'm going to come real close to the line here. Is he doing it to be punished or to be loved?
That
there could be an interesting question if the narrator hadn't just spelled it out.
But okay, to be punished because he's forced into existence. His very mom doesn't want to have him. He's just about to die, but then he's saved because he shouts out. He says, I'm here, pay attention to me, which is what a baby does. He's never asked for such a thing,
until the end.
Until the end. So I think his existence has no purpose. Because we see him walking back to Paris, and the narrator voice goes, with what he has in his pocket, he could bring everyone to his knees, even the Pope, even be considered as the new Messiah. He doesn't do that. Despite the power he has created, he doesn't do that. Also, it shows you that women can be very empowering if you take a gender lecture of this. This is a problem I have with the book as well as the movie. Why didn't he do something with this? He's brought everyone to his knees. He's got Alan Rickman to admit that he was his son, although this is completely untrue. He got the Pope to, So.
I kind of took son as metaphorically.
Which is, I don't know what to think of that, because he has a saber in hand, his sword, and he says, I will not fall for your tricks. Because during the whole orgy scene, he stayed away, just observing and thinking, what is he doing? How is it that no one notices that is just plain evil, that is just tricking everyone?
And he
then
slowly makes his way toward the stage, effectively, with a sword, and he's gonna kill him. And then
and the sword collapses, and as you know, the sword is really metaphorically, it could be seen as masculinity, and then the sword falls down. You hear the sound, and then he's brought to his knees, and I'm sorry, forgive me, my son. So the Alan Rickman would have been the only person capable of seeing through him, and with that power of the perfume, despite the smell of his own daughter in it,
he can't resist. Yeah,
he's conquered. Yeah.
One last bit of trivia. The book was the source of the inspiration for the Nirvana song Scentless Apprentice. Kurt Cobain claimed to carry the book in his pocket and said that he identified with Grenouille's alienation. I have to check out that song. I've never been a big Nirvana fan, but I have to take a listen to that now that I know the source material.
Oh, me too, because I've never heard that track. But how interesting, because I always wondered, who else did something else with that. With the novel as well as the film, because there are many connections, to many things in art when it gets adapted. But this seems to be the sort of only masterpiece of Suskind. It's, I don't know, but the director does quite a good job, because the material itself is very hard to come up with and deal with. Simply, this film and movie will not let you rest, because you always wonder why is Grenouille so sympathetic, as I was saying in the intro. Why is it that Laura doesn't escape his grip and doesn't is not allowed to live? All of those questions. How is it that he has this technique that no one taught him? Born in the ugliest place possible, And Boldini, he was very rich, very aristocratic. He has all the tools he wants to create anything he has. Is enabled, despite 10 handkerchiefs, to recreate the smell of something. This amour and psyche that by Pelissier.
That's sort of a classic story. The novice prodigy with no skill who just bests the experienced, professional. Which is basically kind of what this story is on its surface without all the killing. All right, so on to sequels and remakes. There's really no room for a sequel because he doesn't reproduce at any point in the movie. I think he probably dies a virgin. But so there's no room for a sequel. It's too soon for a remake. Although if there were a remake, I would love to see Del Toro.
Oh my!
There are no creatures, no monsters. In fact, no inhuman monsters. But I think it really fits Del Toro's style.
You say that because you've recently seen Shape of Water.
Well, I think I think the first time I saw this, well before I saw Shape of Water, I was thinking Del Toro. Just visually, it kind of it fits his style, I think, really nicely. And I haven't seen a lot of Taike's work, other than this and Cloud Atlas, which I wasn't fond of because I love the book so much, and they kind of butchered it. I kind of blame the Wachowskis more for that. But I do want to look into more of his stuff now. Anyway, on to Brains. I really liked it. I do have a bit of an issue with how quickly he just goes to cold-blooded murder, but that's really my only criticism. I'm going 4.5.
This is tough because it's my favorite book, favorite film, favorite balance between good and evil.
I already had 5 down before last night when putting my notes together, but you said you're going to surprise me.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Okay.
Because it's tough to say, because when you see something many times, your criticism improves.
Right. Yeah.
You can as I said, I think the director should have seized that film and he should have done something personal with it, so that he would have verged from the original plot in the book, but then he could have created something out of his own, based on that, because he simply, if I may say so, follows the plot of the book without giving anything else. And it, the experience of watching the film is good if you want to convert reading and smelling with seeing and smelling. because this is what the movie accomplishes very well: the ability to make you see what he smells as you could read it, but besides that, there's nothing new with it. The film, the scenery is great. It is set in grass. You get to see Paris, but you shouldn't be fooled. It is not set in Paris all the time. It is set in Germany, Hamburg.
Well, parts of it are Germany, parts of it are Barcelona.
Yep. But the streets in Paris are nothing next to the streets in Paris. And I read that the streets chosen for that in Hamburg had to be dirtied for 3 days so that it could mimic the actual sort of dirtiness stench of that era.
And you just reminded me of something else I had in my trivia. Apparently Tom Tykwer had the cast live in their costumes for extended periods of time, including sleeping in them, to get them properly dirty.
Oh no. How much dedication can you put when you have such a role? So yeah, 4 out of 5, because it lacks this creativity that I would have liked to see in Teichner's work. And you can do many things with that movie, with that book, sorry, and he didn't.
And so, what have we learned?
Wait, say that again.
What have we learned?
Oh, what have we learned? Well, next time I pull out an handkerchief, I'm gonna think about it, because I didn't know that it could lead to such an orgy. This is not safe for work,
The show isn't. We have an explicit tag. And I learned that I'm really grateful for modern sanitation. You hear about how bad it used to be, but given how much work Tykwer put into it, I get the impression that's really how bad it was. And wow. All right, that's it for Perfume, the story of murder. Thanks for joining me, Appoline. Where can people find you and your work online?
I'm a published poet. You can't know that from what I'm saying. I said I was a fan of Charles Baudelaire, as I'm a French citizen. I grew up with that, But you can find my poetry book, which is basically a gathering of all the experiences I've had from living in China to going to California. And you can find the telling of all those experiences in my book, which is available in French if you ever dare to read it in French, and in English. There's no original language, as I translate my poems myself.
And what's the name of it?
Oh, From the Bottom of My Heart, which is a translation from the Latin title, because I didn't want to publish something solely in English or solely in French, so I chose Latin because it's a nice balance between the two. And it can be found on Amazon.
Okay. And anywhere else?
I have a DeviantArt profile. So for those of you who are not familiar with DeviantArt, it's it's a website where you can create many kind of different forms of arts. Many forms of arts. The R sound in my French is sort of a torture right now.
I've been studying French for a few months, and the French R and the American R are vastly different.
I think I'll never get it. So yeah, my profile on DA features many school pictures, as I'm a big fan of schools.
I wanted to bring that up particularly because I'm a big fan of your poetry, but your photography is brilliant. I really wanted you to show that off as well.
Thank you for saying that. It's just this sort of sensitivity that you can find throughout my poetry that I think is shown through my camera and my lens just as well.
Yeah. And of course, you'll find all of Appoline's links down in the description, as well as links to the trailer for Perfume and a link to its IMDb page. And of course, all of our links, mine and Scott's, social media, ways to subscribe to the audio version on RSS and iTunes, links to our voicemail and our email address. And of course, until next time, when we'll be reviewing Natural Born Killers, kicking off an Oliver Stone trilogy, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life, there you are.